Thank you. Well, it's fabulous to be here, and it's fabulous to be at church after such a long time. The church I attend, which is Collins Street Baptist, we're still not back yet, so we're looking at hopefully going back in February. So it is wonderful to be here, and it's certainly been an interesting year for most of us last year.
The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." He then added, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man."
So who was Nathanael, and why do we care about his calling to follow Jesus? I mean, we do know that he was from Cana in Galilee. Who can tell me what the miracle performed in Cana was? Water into wine. A lot of people would love to have that, wouldn't they? It's interesting because my friends who claim not to be interested in Christianity, they all know about the water into wine. We also know that Nathanael was a bit of a snob. I mean, he heard that Jesus was from Nazareth. He goes, nothing good can come from Nazareth. And there seemed to be a bit of rivalry between Cana, which is in Galilee, and Nazareth, which is in Lower Galilee. You got that? Lower. Bit like the rivalry, I believe, between Melbourne and Sydney. Or being a Kiwi, we have a rivalry between the North Islanders and the South Islanders. Anyone else come from New Zealand? There was always an argument about which was the mainland. Was it the North Island or was it the South Island? And in my household, my parents were both born and raised in the South Island, and all us kids were born and raised in the North Island. So there was lots of sledging took place, especially when the rugby was on, because you don't, unlike in Australia where you inherit your parents' team, football team. In New Zealand, you follow the team from where you were born and brought up. I sort of imagining what it was like when Cana and Nazareth played in the final of the cricket or the soccer, and all the sledging that would have gone on the field and on the side of the field. We also know that Nathanael was a skeptic, don't we? He was very skeptical about this man called Jesus. I mean, he came to Jesus through an invite. Philip invited him. Jesus called Philip, and Philip immediately went and found Nathanael and said, "Come and see." Philip didn't buy into the prejudices that Nathanael had against people from Nazareth. He didn't say, "Yeah, there's great people that can come from Nazareth. This is one of them." He didn't go there. He didn't engage in any religious arguments or discussions. Philip simply said, "We have found him." We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote. We've found Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth. Nathanael, come and see. And Nathanael, despite his scepticism, he was willing to go and see. What does Jesus do? He assesses the character of Nathanael very quickly. He doesn't focus on the negative things about his prejudice or his scepticism. He says, Nathanael, you're a man with no deceit, no fraud, no treachery. You are a genuine Israelite. If it was in Australia, he'd said, you're a genuine good bloke. You're a man who fears and obeys God. Nathanael was a bit taken aback by this and wondered how on earth could Jesus know him? I mean, he didn't think he'd ever met this man before. Jesus said, I saw you under the fig tree. And of course the fig tree was very significant. It was a sacred place. It was a place where people went to pray, to study, to meditate. It was a place of peace and safety in the midst of life. And people would go there to sit and to learn. For some reason, we do not know why, that triggered something in Nathanael. Those words had an incredible impact on him. It may have been that when he heard the words of Jesus, he recognised that Jesus possessed a clear insight into him, into the things he was thinking about under that fig tree. Maybe he was actually sitting there thinking about Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth, who the prophets and Moses have spoken about. Whatever it was, it changed Nathanael. He had an epiphany and went from being a skeptic to being a fanatical believer, all in a few seconds. Listen to his words. Rabbi, a term of honour. You are truly the Son of God. A revelation, insight into who Jesus was. You are the King of Israel. But did it finish there? No. Jesus went on to promise greater things. A promise that because of his belief in Jesus as the Messiah, Nathanael will be blessed to witness greater evidence of who Jesus truly was. And we know that Nathanael would have witnessed many miracles. The miracle like the healing of the royal official's son in Cana, in his hometown. The healing of the man who'd been crippled for 38 years. The feeding of the 5,000. The raising of Lazarus to life, and many others. And it culminated in the greatest miracle when Nathanael saw the risen Christ. Because the only other place that we find reference to Nathanael is in John 21, when he encounters the risen Christ. Nathanael was hanging out on the beach at the Sea of Tiberias with some of the other disciples, including Simon Peter. And as you do when you hang out at the beach, they all decide to go fishing. And they were all out all night and didn't catch a thing. Very much sounds like my fishing trips, can I tell you? I've been fishing many times, I don't think I've ever caught anything. But Jesus turned up at daybreak. He thought he'd cooked them breakfast. He didn't actually, when you read the scripture, and I want to encourage you to read the story in John 21, it's a great story. He didn't really expect them to catch anything because he bought fish along with them to cook. And when he saw that they didn't have any fish, he stayed at the office. He said, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They said no, but they were probably thinking, really? Did you need to rub it in? You can see, we've got no fish. We've been out here all night. You can see that. And Jesus said, cast the net over the other side. And they got so many fish they couldn't haul the nets in. And they turned up to the beach for their breakfast, and they never asked Jesus who he was, because they knew, as he fed them with bread and fish. How did you encounter Jesus? How did you encounter the Jesus that did not condemn you for who you were? Was it an invitation to come see? For those of us who are part of the LGBTIQ+ community, we may have come to see with a lot of scepticism, like Nathaniel. We may have come and said, can anything good come from a church? We may have been fearful that we would be rejected. We might have been tired of trying to fit in or trying to hide who we truly were because of the way churches have treated us. Yet there was still something there, wasn't it? There's still something that draws us into a relationship with Christ, into community with others. Whatever it was, we came and saw. I realised in my early 30s that I was a lesbian. I had this new boss and had this unbelievable attraction to her, just over the top, in your face. Oh my gosh, I must be a lesbian. Nothing ever came of it with her, but it was a shock. It was, oh. You see, I was in a church where they talked about homosexuality linked to Sodom and Gomorrah. And I always sat there feeling sorry for this guy, blonde guy who sat in the front row, because everyone knew that he was gay. And I always thought, that's awful. How does he feel? And then suddenly I was the person sitting up the back that was feeling awful because this is what I was hearing. According to them, I was not acceptable to God or to the church. And when I was forced to leave, I started to look for another church. So I went on the attack. I rode my motorbike with my jeans and my leather jacket. And I said to the pastor, I'm a lesbian, you got a problem with that? Initially it was no, but as time passed, they started to try and change the way I dressed and then introduce me to people who'd been cured of homosexuality. So eventually I got on my motorbike and left and went to MCC Melbourne, which was then in South Melbourne. And funnily enough, it was going to MCC Melbourne that I was most afraid of attending. A church that was there for our community. How could there be a church for people like me? I mean, I was not sure if God accepted me because I was a lesbian. How could they be right? And the first few times I crept in the door just as church started, sat in the back. As soon as the service was finished, I scurried out. It was not my style of worship, plus there was no other woman who regularly attended. I was sceptical. How can they be Christians when they talk openly and honestly about sex? What sort of people are these? I struggled, but at the same time kept attending because on one hand I did feel accepted. Then in 1997, the Universal Fellowship at MCC had their worldwide general conference in Sydney. Did anyone here go to that? Yeah, Les is waving from the back. I went with many others from MCC Melbourne, including Les, and we met Jesus at that place in a way that transformed us. We met Jesus and people from MCCs all around the world. I have to confess, I actually met an MCC minister from LA who I later dated for a while, but we won't go there. More importantly though, we met Jesus in worship. I remember us all sitting in a row with John Fowler at the end. We were all worshipping, and I looked along the row and we were all just sitting with tears running down our face, and John was all looking at us going, what on earth is going on with the people from my church? It was so transforming, because we actually come to realise that we were okay. But that encounter was not the end, it was only the beginning. Like Nathaniel, we're invited to a relationship that is full of miracles and transformation. And like Philip, we can also invite others to come and see. It's not always easy, and I know that, because there's so much anger in our community towards the church, and for good reason. But often also people use it as an excuse not to let God in. It also takes courage to come out in our community as Christians, doesn't it? It really does. But we have the opportunity to invite people to come see. Martin Luther King, in his book, I don't know if anyone's read this, Stride Towards Freedom, writes of a miracle that was transforming for so many people, especially the African American people who have experienced and continue to experience discrimination. He writes, I was ready to give up. With my cup of coffee sitting untouched before me, I tried to think of a way to move out of the picture without appearing a coward. In this state of exhaustion, when my courage had all but gone, I decided to take my problem to God. With my head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud. The words I spoke to God that night are still vivid in my memory. I said, I'm here to take a stand for what I believe is right. But now I am afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. At that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I had never experienced God before. It just seems as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, stand up for justice, stand up for truth, and God will be at your side forever. Almost at once my fears began to go, my uncertainty disappeared. I was ready to face anything. We're not all called to be Martin Luther Kings. We cannot all be Martin Luther Kings. But we're all invited to take a stand, to invite people to come and see, to meet this Jesus who has changed our lives. We don't have to have the right words to say. We don't have to be able to argue from the Bible. We don't have to understand theology. We just need to invite them to come and see. They may be cynical and have every right to be, but if they encounter Jesus, it will be transformational. If they come and see, God will do the rest. God sees us and accepts us, and God accepts them like he did Nathaniel. I want to read you some words from Psalm 139 that's been paraphrased. God has taken a good look at you and knows exactly what makes you tick. God knows when you've got your feet up and when you're on the job. God can read your mind like an open book. God sees where you are going and where you stop. And God knows all about what you do and why. God knows exactly what you're going to say, even before you open your mouth. God is in front of you. God is behind you. God is beside you. God's hand is on your shoulder at every turn. I found it encouraging and challenging preparing for tonight. I haven't preached for a long, long time, and I'm not the world's best preacher, but I love reading the stories in the Bible. I loved being challenged by them. And I loved spending time thinking about God's call in my life. I've also been really challenged about how is it can we invite others to come and see, to encounter God. I'd like to invite you to spend some time in the next week to remember when you were called and how it transformed your life. And to also think about how you and this church can invite others to encounter a God who brings transformation and healing. Amen.